so nice to meet you. Congratulations on this haunting, beautiful, sad, like sad, right? No, fine.
It's a little sad, yeah.
To everybody in this movie, honest to God. Paloma, let's start with you because it is based on this kind of gothic ghost story written by J.M. Barrie. I mean, come on. So pedigree's already there, the guy who created Peter Pan. You're not messing with some good material here. So I was wondering, was this on your radar before or when you were sent the script? Did you just kind of immediately connect with Lily?
Yeah, I mean, as indie filmmaking goes, I didn't get a whole lot of notice. And sometimes with just how casting goes, I was in like one of their final rounds of auditioning. It just whatever didn't come through to my agent earlier on.
Yeah.
So I auditioned for it 2 weeks prior to them shooting. So it was a real whirlwind of like I auditioned, I think I got a call back 2 days later, and then like within 3 days I was
Wow.
traveling to Prince Rupert to shoot.
By
Um,
ferry, right? You have to get there on the ferry.
I did. I took the lovely ferry boat through the Northwest Passage. It's beautiful.
Nice. Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
But how did you find your way in to kind of connect to this character, Lily? Because what she goes through, she doesn't really have a lot of happiness going on in her throughout her whole life, really, before she crosses over and then comes back, right?
Yeah. It was more about connecting to Lily. Like the directors had this vision that Lily was stuck in time as a bit of a little girl in a woman's body.
Right.
So thinking through the eyes, through the lens of a child, like the naivety of a child looking at things. And then I didn't honestly, when I first read the script and even when I was first preparing for the role, I didn't think it would be as emotionally taxing as it was. But
Right.
then given the circumstances, like when I was put in those positions of like, oh, really taking in that my mom was no longer alive, that all these things had happened that I had missed out, that this
Yeah.
traumatic thing happened to my son, like all these things. Then I realized it was a much more emotional journey for the character of Lily, for sure, than I
Yeah.
had really imagined.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. And Camille, for you, you're playing the sisters in you who, again, like she must have this sense of like, just feeling awful the whole time because she was playing with her sister and then her sister's gone and she's like, oh my God. And then your character, you don't see her for 25 years. And you know what? Yeah, it's 25. And it's like, how do you step into this kind of a character to even envision what a woman like this would go through? If it's like losing somebody and then thinking they're dead and then they come back, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think it's sort of almost like Zinnia's journey is almost a reverse journey to Lily's, where she goes through all the hard things of life that harden you to a degree.
For
And then
sure.
when Lily comes back, that's sort of a reawakening. I get so emotional when I talk. Oh my God, I'm such a nerd. Anyway, sorry.
No,
Sorry.
it's
So then
good because
like
I was very emotional watching it. Yeah.
so then it's like going back to a place of faith and more of a childishness and like a reopening of hope.
Yeah. Oh no, for sure. Absolutely. And then Paloma, how do you approach this character? Because you play her so innocently, obviously. You've gone, you're checking out the other side of the tide here, whatever, and then you come back and you're dealing with so much heaviness. Like there's so much weighing on her shoulders, and then the responsibility, like her sister was watching her son and all. You know what I mean? How do you approach something like that
Mm-hmm.
off script, like just maybe mentally?
Mm-hmm. I mean, just really putting myself in the shoes of Lily and really imagining what that would be like to go through all these circumstances. Um, it's not like I couldn't connect to real life things that happened to me, so
Good.
ending of time. But
Yeah.
yeah, just how much of a shock that would be to your system. So really trying to breathe through it and be present as Lily, reacting to the circumstances as is, and the way that it came out to be was a pretty emotional performance for because it's a pretty big ride for Lily the whole movie.
Yeah, it's a pretty big ride for everybody. I think for sure that everybody has their own things that they're going through. Camille, tell me a little bit about when the two of you, like you said, like Paloma said, she's like 2 weeks gets the role, gets out there, and you guys start shooting, and you're out in this kind of wilderness, which we'll talk about in a second. But tell me about, the first time you two connected, and was it kind of an instant chemistry as sisters? How do you develop that bond? But yet you're sisters that have been estranged too, right?
Well, we'd worked together before on a series called Unspeakable,
Okay.
where I was playing her boyfriend's mother. And
Okay.
so, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. It goes through a long period of time. So we'd worked together before, so then we already knew each other, which was nice. And then also Paloma's very good at showing vulnerability. So it's very easy. She's very open. So it's easy to connect with her. It's easy to connect with you. And then, just develop that bond, especially one that's supposed to be protective to a degree. So I thought that came quite naturally, I felt.
Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit about the location because it clearly is a character in the film, like no question, right? It's just beautiful, but it's interesting because you had certain amount of time to cross, like you had to wait for the tide, and you had like very little time to cross over, or what, Paloma, can you just talk a little bit about that? Because it's extraordinary to me because when you're shooting outside, you only have a limited amount of light and all this kind of stuff. And then you've got this tide to worry about where you had like these 15-minute windows.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it was a really stressful day, the day of the shoot that was the island days. We had this one day that was on the island. The directors had found this small tidal island that was perfect. It was so beautiful. And so for two times in the day, we had about an hour window where the tide was totally out and you can walk completely comfortably to the other side. But when it was high tide, like you see in the movie, that's no trick of the movie. The tide comes up and you'd have to swim across to get to the other side. So it was a lot of rehearsal, and not only that, we had to have little Lily also cross over.
Exactly.
We
Yeah.
had, how old was she? 6 years old, 6, 7 years
She
old.
had to have been very young. Yeah.
So so when the tide came out nice and low and it was the safest to cross, we of course shot her footage first,
Right.
going across the island, coming back, all that. And then like very quickly the water started coming back and we had to shoot my crossing of the island.
Throw Paloma in there, the water's rising.
Yeah, the water's great. Take a swim. Yeah, no, just fascinating. It's just, it's with crew and everything you've got to think about, right? Yeah. And Camille, I wanted you to address, like, you're working with two directors here. What is that like, when you have two guys telling you, how did it work out between them with Andrew and Austin?
They had a system that works really well, whereas you're not getting the information twice from two different people or conflicting information. So I don't know how they worked it out between them, but they obviously worked out who was going to tell people what, so that it wasn't overwhelming for the actors. So you felt very taken care of. Like it's just two sets of eyes on it. With one cohesive vision. So it was really a nice feeling, actually.
Yeah, and Paloma, what was that like for you as an actor to have, kind of two two guys telling, you know what I mean? Two people are better than one as far as I'm concerned.
For sure, and especially in indie filmmaking where we have to move pretty quick.
Yeah.
So you had one director, or like from my perspective, Andy seemed to be the one that was more concerned about like the actual shots and how it was going to look, and then you had Austin, who was more concerned about, or just was more communicative about our performances and like the emotional journey of the characters. So when it was crunch time and it was like, okay, we've got this one shot, I've had the experience before in other indie movies where the director obviously gets more concerned with actually being able to shoot the scene than the emotion behind the scene, so you don't get that connection. But we were very lucky that we did have the two sets of eyes, so one person could be concerned with the mechanics of the scene, and one person could be concerned with the emotion.
Nice, very nice. Just to wrap it up, Camille, I'm going to ask you first. We all grew up with ghost stories. This is clearly a ghost story. And what's it about? First off, did you go to camp? Like, were you into that? Like as a kid, maybe like somebody, sitting around a campfire telling ghost stories, and did it
Not
scare
a
the crap out of
campfire.
you?
No, I never really did camp. My family they weren't campers. But I do believe in ghosts, and I believe there is one in my apartment because things fall off the wall. And like the other day I was standing there and like a piece of paper got thrown at me. And then there's like reasons like, oh, it could have been a gust of wind, but was it? I don't know. So I really think there's one in my apartment, like a friendly ghost, but a
Yeah.
ghost.
Like it's Casper, and it's okay.
Yeah,
Like,
it might be the ghost of a cat or a dog. I don't know. Something, I feel it. It jumps up on the couch with me. I don't know.
it's okay. As long as it's nice and doesn't bother you, that's totally fine. And Paloma, what about you? Like, how do you feel about ghost stories? And why are people just so drawn to them? Well, we like to have that little jump scare, I think, sometimes.
Yeah, well, I think that we're all curious about, what happens to us after we die. And I like to think that, sure, like our energy stays within the world in some way. So to believe that ghosts in whatever energy form are around us kind of makes living a bit more bearable. And so, yeah, I'm totally on board that being connected to like the other world, and there's some of us that can get into that frequency better than others.
Sure.
So I think it's fun to explore that, and I think as audience members it's fun to watch that, and of course, yeah, it's fun to get thrilled by a movie as well.
100%. I agree. Well, you ladies did a fantastic job in this. Like I said, it's lovely. It really, really is. And it made me think, like, especially as a mom, it's like, well, God, I couldn't imagine, not seeing my kid for 25 years and then them coming back. And, it makes you think a lot. So congratulations, kudos to you both. And thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.